guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's vlog. For those of you that are returning, thank you so much for coming back, and for those of you that are new here, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe below and hit the little notification bell if you would like to be notified when I put new videos up. So today I thought I would do a video that is well overdue, and I just have not felt ready to put it out there, but I feel like I am finally ready. So in light of October being Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, I thought I would go ahead and finally share Kelvin's story. So share my stillbirth story. So no better place to start than the beginning. So Corey and I got married and we tried to get pregnant for about 2.5 years without success, and finally after about 2 years I got my laparoscopic surgery done for my endometriosis, and directly after that, sure enough, I got pregnant, and we were so happy. We made it through the first 12 weeks, smooth sailing, just regular pregnancy stuff, no issues, and then finally come January 19th, 2018, we had our 20-week anatomy scan, and we were very excited. Corey hadn't been to any of my appointments yet, so this was going to be the first time Corey was going to get to see the baby, and we were just so excited. So we went into our ultrasound and everything seemed normal. It was a long ultrasound. It was about 45 minutes or an hour, and the tech just said she wasn't able to get a good picture of the baby's heart because of his position, and that she was gonna go and grab one of the other girls and see if she could get a better picture. So we thought that was normal, nothing really concerning at that time. My husband Corey was a little concerned that maybe a doctor would come back in and maybe something was wrong, but that was not the case. She came back in and she said that they wanted us to come back in on Monday, so this was a Wednesday. They wanted us to come back in the following Monday and do another ultrasound just so that they could get better heart pictures. And so that all added up. I was a little bit concerned, but not overly concerned, especially as I went back to work and the rest of the day went on and I didn't hear anything, so I figured everything must have been fine. Well, unfortunately, the next morning, I got a phone call from my OB/GYN's office, and they had scheduled me an appointment for the following morning, first thing in the morning, and I had just seen my OB already once that week before my ultrasound, so I knew at that point something was not right. I asked around to some friends, and everybody said not to worry about it, that sometimes they might find markers for certain things, but it might not necessarily be anything too much to worry about. So I was very anxious, but I was hopeful that it was nothing that was going to be major. So my husband and I went into my OB/GYN's office the next morning, and we were both very nervous, me in particular. I just remember being sick to my stomach and not being able to sleep the night before, and just feeling very nervous for what he was going to tell us. I knew he wouldn't be calling us in if there wasn't something wrong. And so I was just hoping and praying that it would be okay. Everything would be okay. And so we went into the office, we got called back, and we sat in the room, and we waited probably for 5 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. And my doctor came in and he sat down, and I just kind of jumped to what we were there for, and I said, "What's wrong with the baby?" And he said, "There's no good way to tell you this, but we found some very alarming things on your anatomy scan." And I said, okay. And he said, the baby's heart is very concerning. He named off 2 heart defects, transposition of the major arteries, and said that basically what that meant was that the 2 main arteries that go into the heart were twisted and into the wrong chambers, the wrong ventricles of the heart. And then he said the other thing that they noticed right away was that your heart is supposed to have 4 different chambers, and our baby's heart had 2 chambers only, and the other 2 were severely underdeveloped to the point where they were essentially non-existent, really. And so I was thinking, I don't know what I was thinking, I was in shock. And he said, it's very concerning. He said it's very serious and it's very alarming. And he said, unfortunately it's Friday and there's not a whole lot we can do right now, but we're gonna get you to come in Monday, do a repeat ultrasound, do a fetal echo, and take a really good look at just the heart. And he said you'll meet with maternal fetal medicine, so the high risk doctors at the hospital, and you'll also meet with a cardiologist, and that will be on Tuesday. And so plan to spend the next 2 days, well, the weekend home, and then Monday and Tuesday plan to spend them here at the hospital, meeting with doctors and specialists and getting some tests and stuff done to find out more information. And he said basically once you meet with MFM and the cardiologist, he said you'll be given a decision, and the decision will be whether you would like to continue on with your pregnancy or whether you would like to interrupt the pregnancy and have the baby now, and lose the baby, basically. And so I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting a marker for something, or a disability of some sort, or I don't know what I was expecting, but it definitely was not that. I remember that appointment as far as what was said. I can't go back there and remember really how I felt. I think I was in complete shock. I did not cry right away. I don't really recall how I feel other than complete devastation and complete shock, and not feeling like I can't understand the world around me and why this is happening, and that this is even a thing. I didn't even know that this could be a thing until right then. And so he apologized. I could tell he felt terrible. You have to sometimes think, like, there's probably so many days when you are an OB and you know, deliver babies and how amazing that must be. But then think of all the days when they have to tell people that their baby has lost a heartbeat and is gone, or that there's something wrong with someone's child. I can't imagine having to tell a mother that. And it was obvious that he had felt terrible about it, and he had been seeing me for a long time. He knew I'd been trying to get pregnant and it had been such a struggle, and he just apologized profusely, and yeah, it was awful. I wasn't expecting that, so I had to go back to my workplace and get my stuff to go home. And that was hard because I was still in shock, and I went back to work, and people knew I was at an appointment. They knew what was going on. And when I got to work and people asked me what happened, that is when I think it hit me, and I just started bawling my eyes out, and I just kept saying, my baby only has half a heart, my baby has half a heart, my baby's heart is broken, my baby's gonna die, my baby's gonna die. And everybody was just so taken aback by that. And it's crazy how when you learn something like that, how your mind can't conceptualize it and you can't cope with it. And so at the time, I just was sitting at my work computer, like totally having a breakdown, but all I could think was, I have to email my manager, I have to email my boss, I have to tell them I have to leave and I can't be here next week. And it's just like so silly because that's not important at the time. Like, I didn't really have to do that, but that's where my mind went. Like, I have to do this, because I couldn't put my thoughts at all towards what was going on. I couldn't conceptualize it, and it's crazy how your body and your mind does that. And so from that point, we went home, and when I got home, I just barely made it to my bed, and I just broke down, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And I just remember it like physically hurting, and like feeling it in my chest, and holding my belly and just crying and crying and crying for ever. I don't know how long, honestly. It was just the worst moment ever. It really was. It was terrible. And so we somehow made it through the weekend. I don't know how, longest weekend of my life, I'm sure. We didn't really leave the house. We didn't really tell anybody. And we went in Monday, and we had another ultrasound that went forever, and we didn't learn much more at that ultrasound. And then in the afternoon, we had a fetal echo, and it was a close look at the heart. And this was with the high-risk doctor, and she kind of explained what we already knew, and she asked us what our understanding of the situation was, and I told her what we understood it to be, and she basically said, okay, yep, that's right. And she, was kind and nice, and I don't really remember the appointments that day. I remember crying a lot, being in shock. I remember running into a friend that works at the hospital and pretending everything was fine because I couldn't even say it out loud. And then we went home that night, and I don't know what we did, to be honest. Probably just laid in bed, cried more. And then we got up the next day to meet with the cardiologist, and the cardiologist, it was a lengthy appointment, and he explained everything to us. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about exactly the specifics of what he said, but we found out that the chances of your baby having a congenital heart defect is under 1%, and our baby had 6 confirmed, 7, one more questionable one. So 6 or 7 congenital heart defects. And he explained each heart defect, and he explained what they could do to the best of what they could do, I guess, with each of those heart defects. But he was unable to explain 100% exactly what would happen with all of them, but he was able to tell us that the prognosis was poor. The baby wouldn't be able to breathe when he was born, and that they could try to do a surgery, but it was still in the experimental stage, and even if it worked, there were still those 6 other things that were wrong. And he's basically said that your baby's chance of survival is very low, and if he survives birth, his chance of living is also very low, and however long he was able to live, it would involve several surgeries. And he said that the baby would suffer to breathe, and there was nothing they could do about that, and that they could try their best to do all kinds of different surgeries to keep the baby alive, but in the end the baby was going to suffer for his whole life, however short that may be, whether it be days, hours, months, and that there was nothing they could do to fix our baby's heart. And so from that appointment, we went back upstairs and met with the high-risk doctor again, where she stated that there was no rush, but they were happy to help us in whatever path that we chose was best, and that there was no wrong thing to do or no right thing to do, but that we would have to talk and decide if we wanted to continue to stay pregnant and try to go full term, or if we would like to interrupt the pregnancy at 22 weeks. I would get induced, go into labor, and have our baby, and he would die during labor most likely, or within seconds after labor. And so, how do you explain what being faced with that decision feels like? I don't know. I know that it's more common than people know or think. I know that a lot of people probably don't talk about it. And I know that no decision, like they said, no decision is wrong and no decision is right. It's a personal decision, and it's a decision that only someone that's been through it, and only a child's mother and father would know what is best for that child. And so I knew kind of from the get-go, I guess from the start of hearing all that, that I did not want to bring this baby into this world to only know pain and suffering for however long it would be. And that even though I wanted to keep him and I wanted to have him because we had waited so long to get there, that I could not bring a baby into this world to only suffer and be in pain, to just die. And so that was where we stood on it, and it wasn't an easy decision, but it was the one that we came to, and it was the right decision for Calvin. And I know a lot of other people would have chose differently, and I think that's okay. And I think that's just as right and just as good of a decision. And that's what is right for that person and their child, and what they believe, and that's what's right for them. And interrupting this pregnancy, although difficult decision, was the right decision for our baby. And I truly feel that, and other people may not feel that, and it's going to be very controversial, and I know that, which is why I've been so hesitant to do this video. But that was our decision, and it was right for Calvin, and I will not feel guilty for making the best decision for my child. And no one else is going to know what that decision, no one else is going to know what was right and what was wrong for my child, because he was my child. So we did some paperwork and that day, and it was a Tuesday. We were told to come back on Thursday morning at 8 in the morning, where I was to get induced and hopefully go into labor. And so that's what we did. We went home. I spent the Wednesday and Thursday. I had a mixture of emotions. I felt like I needed to disconnect myself from my baby, because that was my way of trying to protect myself. That was my way of trying to protect myself from the pain. But I also felt like I needed to bond with my baby, because it was the only time I had with him. And they ask you all kinds of things if you want to hold them, and all of that stuff. And at the time, I was just so broken and so hurt that I said I didn't want to see him. Honestly, I thought it would somehow hurt less if I didn't see him, or it would somehow be easier, which is just silly. But I just didn't really want anything to do with him. I wanted to just get it over with, go into labor and have him. And I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to name him. I didn't know it was a boy at the time. We weren't planning on finding out the gender. And so I went in on Thursday morning, and I got induced at 8 or 9. And there's so many things that you don't think about when you think of late loss. Like the fact that you have to go through labor and deliver a child just like you would if your child was living and okay. And you have to fill out immense amounts of paperwork, and you have to call funeral homes and decide if you want to bury your baby or if you would like to cremate your baby, and you have to arrange all that, and it's just a lot, and you don't think about it, and it's just crazy, and you're completely numb. I went in, I didn't cry, I just went in, and I felt completely numb, and I felt like I just had to be strong and just, go through labor and deliver a baby, and I'd have to deal with all of the shit that came with it afterwards. And so that's what we did. I was in labor for 12 hours, and that night at 9:34, I delivered our son at 21 weeks and 4 days. He was 10.5 inches long and just under 1 pound. And in that moment, it was what I can imagine to be just like anybody would feel when they welcome their child or they get to meet their child for the first time. I thought he was perfect. His feet and his little hands and his face and everything, he looked just like my husband Corey, and I just thought he was perfect. And I was so just overjoyed and so overwhelmed with so much love that I had for him, and he was just perfect. And so we spent about 45 minutes with him together, and then we had to say goodbye to him, and that was hard. I was tired though. I had been in labor all day, and I had just gotten my IV put in for my pain meds, and literally just got them, and then I delivered them like 5 minutes later. So they didn't really kick in by the time I had him, but they did help me for afterwards. I was exhausted, and so we stayed the night at the hospital. We slept on and off. The nurses had to come in and do their checks on me and stuff, and then we got up the next morning, packed our stuff. My husband went and got the car, came up and got me. That is when it really started to click that our baby had died, because we were walking to the car where all the husbands pick up their wives and their new babies, and it seemed like, I'm sure it wasn't, but it seemed like there was several other women excited and anxiously with their babies, taking them home, and I wasn't. I was just empty inside, and my arms were empty, and I was leaving my baby there, where I'd never see him again. And I just kept thinking about where he was, and that he should be with me in my arms, but that he was probably in some cold morgue somewhere by himself, all alone. And it was just an awful thought, and it was an awful feeling. And that's when it first started to really hit me that, oh my gosh, our baby is dead and we're never gonna see him again. And it was awful. So we came home, and I can't tell you what happened the days after. I don't remember. I was in shock. I was not eating, I don't think, sleeping a lot, staying in bed. I felt terrible. I was in shock. I don't remember. I was empty and numb and just completely lost, and I couldn't make sense of anything that had happened, and I didn't know why this was happening to me and why the world was so terrible. And that went on for a while, and literally the weeks and months after, I was in a fog. I couldn't concentrate. I didn't understand the world. I didn't understand anything. And so that's where I'm going to leave that part of the story. I've been wanting to share my story, share Kelvin's story, for a long time, but I just wasn't ready yet. And I finally kind of felt as ready as I feel I'm ever going to be. A lot of women that go through pregnancy loss, miscarriages, stillbirths, late-term losses, infant death, and it's so isolating and so lonely, and you feel like you're the only one in so many of those circumstances. There's guilt associated with it and shame. So I wanted to tell my story. I know there's other people out there that have been through similar experiences. People are less inclined to share their story when they've been faced with such a decision and they have taken the path that we chose to take, because it's very personal and every situation is different and every person is different and they come from different backgrounds and have different beliefs and they will make different choices. And so I feel that people are ashamed and too guilty to share their stories when they go through having to interrupt their pregnancy. And I just wanted to put my story out there so that people know that this happens, and it happens more than we think, and that some people will choose to keep their baby and go full term and pray and hope that a miracle will happen, and maybe it will and maybe it won't, and that's the right choice for them. And then other people will choose get induced and have their baby early due to the prognosis, and that's okay too. And there's different paths, and both paths are okay paths, and depending on the situation and you as a person and what is best for your child, you will take the best path that you know at the time. And that was the right decision for my son. I know it was, and other people might disagree, and that's okay, but you know, that was the right decision for my child. And so that's the route that I decided to take, and I'm not going to be ashamed, and I'm not going to be too guilty to share my son's short life with people because of that. And I don't think other people should either. So I'm going to end it at that, and I hope that, you know, this might give you a little insight, a little awareness on the situations that happen. And just remember to be kind to people. Just because you have a certain belief doesn't mean that others are going to have that same belief. And yeah, just be nice in the comments. Don't rip me to shreds, please. I don't think anyone will, but you never know once you put these things online. And I will do another video next month, most likely on stillbirth, or maybe more on Kelvin. But until then, I will see you guys later, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks, guys.